The courthouse in Maple Creek, a modest town tucked between long highways and wide cornfields, had never felt so heavy. Its brick walls had witnessed divorces, petty thefts, and the occasional heated land dispute, but this morning was different. The air itself seemed tense, thick with unspoken expectation, as though the building knew something important was about to happen. Wooden benches creaked softly as people settled in. A few reporters sat near the back, notebooks ready but expressions tired. This case had gone on longer than anyone expected, and most assumed today would simply tie it up with a neat legal bow. Another ruling. Another name filed away. Life would move on as it always did. At the front of the courtroom, Judge Harold Whitman adjusted his glasses and scanned the room. He had presided over trials for nearly 25 years, long enough to recognize patterns in human behavior. He could usually sense when a case was straightforward and when it was. This one troubled him, though he couldn't quite say why. Everything on paper looked solid. Too solid, perhaps. To his right sat the prosecution table, stacked with neatly organized files. The assistant district attorney, Melissa Crane, flipped through her notes with practiced confidence. She had built her case carefully, brick by brick, relying on witness testimony, circumstantial evidence, and most importantly, the actions of a highly trained police dog. She believed in procedure. She believed in systems. And she believed justice was on her side. Across the aisle, the defense table told a different story. Papers were scattered, notes scribbled in margins, coffee cups long gone cold. Daniel Harper, the defense attorney, sat quietly, hands folded, eyes fixed on the floor. He had learned early in his career that hope could be dangerous. Still, something in him refused to fully surrender. There were gaps in this case, small ones, almost invisible, but gaps nonetheless. And sometimes truth slipped through cracks no one else noticed. Near the front, beside the prosecution, sat Officer Ryan Keller with his K-9 partner. The German Shepherd lay calmly on the polished floor, its black and tan coat immaculate, eyes alert but relaxed. The dog's presence commanded attention without effort. Years of training had shaped its posture, its stillness, its quiet authority. Many in the room felt safer simply knowing the animal was there. This dog was more than a tool. It was a symbol of discipline, reliability, and order. In Maple Creek, the K-9 unit was respected almost to the point of reverence. Children waved when the dog appeared at school demonstrations. Local papers had run features praising its service record. To most people, questioning the dog's actions felt almost unthinkable. Officer Keller rested a hand lightly on the leash, a familiar gesture that spoke of trust built over countless hours. He believed in his partner completely. That belief had guided him the night of the arrest, and it guided him still. Several rows back, nearly invisible among adults twice her size, sat a 3-year-old girl. Her name was Lily. She swung her legs slightly above the floor, shoes not quite reaching the ground. In her arms, she held a faded teddy bear with one missing eye, its fur worn thin from constant handling. The bear had gone everywhere with her since the night everything changed. Doctors called it a coping mechanism. Her aunt simply called it comfort. Lily didn't understand courtrooms or trials. She didn't know why so many people spoke in serious voices or why her aunt kept squeezing her hand as if afraid she might disappear. All Lily knew was that this room felt wrong. Too quiet, too stiff, too full of eyes that never smiled. She leaned into her aunt's side, thumb brushing the teddy bear's ear. Since that night months ago, Lily had grown quieter. She still spoke sometimes, small words, simple requests, but much of her chatter had vanished. It was as if a door inside her had closed, locking away something too big for words. The adults said she was too young to remember. 3-year-olds forgot things, they said. Memories blurred, details faded. They believed time would soften whatever had frightened her. But children did not remember the way adults did. They remembered in fragments, in sensations, in sudden flashes that arrived without warning. Lily's eyes wandered around the courtroom, drawn not by faces but by movement. the slow sway of a ceiling fan, the judge's gavel resting beside his hand, the polished badge on Officer Keller's chest catching the light. Then she saw the dog. At first she didn't react. She simply stared, her small brow furrowed, lips pressing together as if trying to solve a puzzle. The dog lifted its head slightly, ears twitching, sensing movement or sound, though its gaze did not meet hers. Something inside Lily tightened. Her fingers curled into the teddy bear's fur. Her breathing changed, shallow, uneven. Her aunt noticed and whispered her name softly, brushing Lily's hair back from her face. "It's okay," she murmured. "Just sit with me." Lily didn't respond. The dog shifted again, adjusting its position, nails clicking softly against the floor. The sound echoed louder in Lily's mind than it did in the room. Her chest felt heavy. Her stomach twisted. She didn't know why. She only knew that this feeling was familiar. Judge Whitman cleared his throat, calling the room to order. The low murmur of voices faded instantly. "We will proceed with the final statements," he said calmly. Melissa Crane stood, smoothing her jacket. She spoke with clarity and conviction, outlining the case one last time. She spoke of evidence, procedure, and reliability. She spoke of trust in trained professionals and systems designed to protect the public. Her voice never wavered. As she spoke, Lily's attention drifted away from the words. Adult voices often blurred together for her, but her eyes stayed fixed on the dog. Every now and then it glanced around the room, alert yet composed. To everyone else it looked like discipline. To Lily it looked like something else entirely. Images stirred in her mind, not clear pictures but feelings. Bright lights, loud voices, a sharp smell that made her nose sting, and the dog moving fast, barking, pulling at its leash. Her heart began to race. Daniel Harper rose next, delivering his closing argument more quietly. He spoke of doubt, of assumptions, of how even well-trained systems could fail when humans misunderstood them. He didn't expect to win hearts, only to plant a seed. As he spoke, Lily shifted on the bench. Her aunt felt it and looked down. "Lily," she whispered. The child's gaze never moved. Her small hand slipped free from her aunt's grasp. No one noticed at first. The courtroom was focused on the lawyers, on the judge, on the ritual of justice unfolding as it always did. No one watched the little girl slide down from the bench, teddy bear clutched tightly to her chest. Her feet touched the floor. She took one small step forward, then another. And in that moment, before anyone could stop her, before anyone understood what was about to happen, the quiet courtroom stood on the edge of something no one could have predicted. Something was about to change. And it would begin with a child everyone believed had nothing to say. Maple Creek's police department had long taken pride in its K-9 unit. Among the officers, there was an unspoken reverence for the dogs. They were more than tools. They were partners, extensions of themselves trained to follow instincts honed over months of rigorous instruction. In the courtroom, the German Shepherd lay at perfect attention beside Officer Ryan Keller, its coat shining under the harsh fluorescent lights, its eyes calm yet alert. The dog exuded a quiet authority that demanded respect. Everyone in the room felt it, even those who had no experience with police work. The Shepherd's record was impeccable. Years of service, dozens of arrests, multiple commendations. Officer Keller had spent countless hours walking, training, feeding, and bonding with his partner. He trusted this dog completely. Many officers in the department said the K-9 could detect trouble before humans could. To them, it wasn't just about obedience. It was instinct, honed and precise. Mistakes were almost unheard of. And yet today, that perfection was about to be questioned. Months earlier, the dog had been involved in the arrest at the center of this case. A robbery had taken place in a quiet neighborhood, and the police had relied on the K-9 to track the suspect. According to the report, the dog had identified the man who was now on trial. Evidence collected and eyewitness accounts had supported the arrest, making it seem airtight. The prosecution leaned heavily on the dog's record, confident that the animal's instincts were infallible. But the defense saw a flaw. Daniel Harper had studied the case from the start, noticing subtle inconsistencies. The suspect's timeline didn't quite match the dog's movements. Surveillance footage showed shadows and shapes that could have misled even a highly trained canine. In a town like Maple Creek, people trusted the police and the dogs implicitly. Questioning their actions felt almost sacrilegious. Yet Harper knew there were gaps that couldn't be ignored. The courtroom itself reflected that reverence. Citizens seated on the benches regarded the dog with awe. Some whispered about its past successes, sharing stories of drug finds, missing person recoveries, and brave feats that had made the news. For most, it was impossible to imagine the animal making a mistake. It wasn't just a dog, it was a living symbol of law and order. Melissa Crane, the assistant district attorney, approached her closing arguments with that confidence in mind. She had meticulously documented the dog's involvement, drawing a timeline that made it seem undeniable. The suspect fled, the dog tracked him, the arrest was made. Every step had been precise, controlled, justified. The K-9 had acted according to training and procedure. She could feel the weight of the courtroom's attention on her as she outlined the chain of events. It was methodical, professional, perfect. Yet as she spoke, Lily's gaze remained locked on the dog. Adults in the courtroom barely noticed the child shifting slightly in her seat. To them, she was too small, too young, too irrelevant to have any insight. But children, as everyone in Maple Creek would soon learn, notice what adults miss. The dog, oblivious to human doubts, shifted slightly in its position. Its ears twitched as it caught a scent on the air. Subtle movements, almost imperceptible. Its eyes scanned the courtroom without fear. The shepherd had reacted that night months ago when it tracked the suspect. But it hadn't acted alone. Officer Keller had followed the dog, interpreting its behavior. What the humans perceived as certainty, the dog had treated simply as stimuli, signals to respond to, not proof of guilt. In that moment in the quiet courtroom, it was easy to forget that dogs didn't understand human notions of right and wrong. They understood instinct, training, and cues. They did not pass judgment. They did not consider innocence or motive. They reacted. As Harper prepared his rebuttal, he considered how to challenge the prosecution without directly questioning the dog. It was delicate. He couldn't accuse the animal of error. It would seem absurd. But he could question how humans interpreted the dog's signals. That line, thin and fragile, could unravel the case if handled carefully. Harper knew he had to proceed with caution. One misstep, and the courtroom's reverence for the K-9 would crush any doubt before it could take root. Meanwhile, Officer Keller remained calm but vigilant. He had worked countless cases with the shepherd and knew its reliability better than anyone. Yet he, too, carried a private worry. A small, nagging thought that perhaps, just perhaps, a mistake had occurred. Not because of the dog, not because of its instincts, but because human perception was imperfect. And sometimes, what seemed like truth on the surface hid shadows beneath. In the back of the room, reporters scribbled notes furiously, aware that the case might take an unexpected turn. Cameras weren't allowed in this courtroom, but their memories, their recordings, would capture every word, every gesture. The tension was almost palpable, and some journalists exchanged glances as though anticipating an event that had yet to arrive. Then quietly, almost imperceptibly, Lily moved. Her small legs carried her closer to the front. Her hand still clutched the teddy bear, its fabric worn soft from years of comforting her through fears and nightmares. Adults barely noticed at first. A shift in the courtroom of a 3-year-old seemed irrelevant until she stopped and pointed. The dog, sensing something subtle, stiffened. Its ears tilted forward, its body alert yet controlled. Officer Keller followed the line of her finger, unsure what the child had noticed. For a moment, the courtroom was suspended in anticipation, like a held breath that might be released at any second. And then Lily spoke. Her words were quiet but clear, cutting through the polished wood and the murmurs of the room. Just 2 words. The courtroom went silent. Every eye turned to the child. The weight of the moment pressed down like a physical force. Judge Whitman adjusted his glasses, trying to process what he had just heard. The officers froze. The reporters scribbled frantically, unsure whether to record the moment or simply watch. It was in that instant that the myth of infallibility surrounding the police dog began to crack. Not because the dog had done anything wrong, but because a child, a mere 3-year-old, had observed something adults had overlooked. Her voice, soft and unassuming, held a power that no experience, no record, no training could match. For months the courtroom had assumed certainty. The dog's record, the evidence, the testimony, all pointed to one outcome. But the child's words, combined with the subtle change in the K9's posture, introduced doubt into the room. It wasn't a loud declaration and it wasn't a legal argument. It was the simplest form of truth, an observation, unfiltered, pure. As Harper watched, a spark of hope ignited within him. He had prepared meticulously for months, but he hadn't counted on this. This small, seemingly inconsequential presence, the quiet child everyone assumed could not remember, was about to shift everything. Melissa Crane, meanwhile, struggled to maintain composure. She had relied on the dog, the procedure, the carefully constructed timeline. Nothing in her training had prepared her for the unexpected influence of a toddler. She swallowed hard, realizing that the courtroom was no longer predictable. What she had seen as absolute, unassailable truth was suddenly open to interpretation. Officer Keller's grip tightened on the leash. The German Shepherd remained calm but alert, its instincts picking up cues that humans could not yet process. The dog sensed that something important had happened, that an unseen truth had surfaced. Its eyes flicked to the girl again, and it remained poised, obedient, yet aware that the situation had changed. Lily, still clutching her teddy bear, had no idea of the chaos she had caused. She only knew that something felt right, or wrong, that the dog was connected to the memory she could not yet fully explain. Her small voice had altered the entire courtroom dynamic, and the adults around her were beginning to realize it. As Judge Whitman called for a brief recess to restore order, the atmosphere was electric. Lawyers whispered urgently. Officers conferred quietly. Reporters prepared for notes that would later become headlines. And through it all, the dog remained a symbol of calm, even as the foundation of certainty beneath it began to shift. That day, everyone learned that even in a room filled with experience, training, and authority, a small observation could overturn assumptions. A child, underestimated and overlooked, had reminded the adults that perception could be flawed, and that the truth sometimes arrived in the simplest of forms. A look, a gesture, a few quiet words that demanded to be heard. By the time the recess ended, the courtroom was no longer just a room of adults arguing over evidence. It had become a place of tension, curiosity, and cautious wonder. The German Shepherd, the human officers, the attorneys, the judge, all sensed that the next moments would reveal far more than anyone had anticipated. And at the center of it all, holding a battered teddy bear, Lily watched the dog, unaware that she was about to play the role that no one else could. Lily's small hand still gripped the worn teddy bear as she sat quietly on the front bench, her legs dangling, shoes barely brushing the floor. The courtroom had resumed its tense quiet after the brief recess, but nothing felt the same. The adults, lawyers, officers, reporters, had all sensed the shift. A 3-year-old had disrupted months of certainty with a single, simple gesture and 2 words, and the weight of that moment hung heavily in the air. To Lily, however, it wasn't dramatic or calculated. She didn't understand law or evidence, judges or lawyers. She understood feelings, smells, and flashes of memory. And tonight she felt a familiar knot in her chest, the one she had felt months ago, the night everything changed. That night months earlier had begun like any other. Lily had been with her mother, quietly playing with toys on the living room floor. Then came the loud knock at the door. Then came the voices, shouts, footsteps, and in the confusion, the sudden barking of a police dog, loud and insistent. The sound had been terrifying, echoing through the house and bouncing off the walls. In the chaos, everything had blurred, lights, shapes, movements. But one thing had remained crystal clear. The German shepherd, trained and disciplined, moving with urgency. Adults had reassured her afterward. "It's okay, sweetie. Everything is fine now," her mother had whispered. But for Lily, it had not been fine. Her young mind had recorded each detail with vivid precision. The dog's ears, its stance, the way it reacted to sounds and smells, the way it seemed to respond to certain humans more than others, all of it lodged in her memory, unfiltered and unrelenting. Even though she had barely spoken in the weeks following, Lily remembered. Children remember in ways adults often overlook. They remember sensations, the tug of a leash, the smell of leather and wet fur, the echo of a command shouted in fear. They remember emotional truth, even when facts are unclear. And they remember patterns, subtle cues adults dismiss as insignificant. Now seated in the courtroom, she noticed the dog again. The same German shepherd, the same alert posture. Her chest tightened. Her fingers clenched around the teddy bear's ear, and she swayed slightly on the bench. The dog's eyes flicked toward her. She didn't know why it responded, but something inside her recognized recognition. Her aunt, watching nervously from the side, noticed the subtle change. "Lily, sweetie, look at me," she whispered, brushing the girl's hair back. But Lily barely registered her aunt's voice. Her focus was elsewhere, pulled by a thread that connected her to the past, the night she had been terrified but had seen something others hadn't noticed. The defense attorney, Daniel Harper, had been observing from the edge of the courtroom. He had spent months dissecting the case, but he had not accounted for a child's memory. He noticed the girl's eyes locked on the dog, and a spark of hope ignited. Something about her gaze seemed to confirm that the chain of events, as interpreted by the prosecution, might not tell the full story. Perhaps the child could provide a piece of the puzzle adults had overlooked. Meanwhile, Officer Keller observed the dog, noting subtle shifts in its behavior. The German shepherd was well-trained, loyal, and disciplined, but even the most reliable dog could sense unusual stress or cues. Its ears twitched slightly, and it adjusted its position, following instincts that humans rarely understood. That small, imperceptible movement would go unnoticed by most, but Lily saw it. Somehow, she understood that the dog's reaction wasn't random. It had meaning. Melissa Crane, the assistant district attorney, continued to argue her case, though now with a creeping uncertainty. She had relied on the dog's actions, confident in the K-9's precision. But even as she outlined timelines and evidence, she noticed the child's gaze lingering on the animal. She brushed it off initially, focusing on her argument, but a small, uncomfortable thought began to nag at her. Could a child really see something adults had missed? Time seemed to stretch. The adults spoke in procedural terms, discussing reliability, precedent, and testimony. For Lily, it was sensory overload. But amidst the noise, she pieced together fragments: the dog's stance, its alert ears, the way it had reacted months ago. She remembered the smell in the house, the way the suspect had moved, the sounds she had been too small to understand. And she remembered the truth. It wasn't that the dog had done anything wrong. It was that the humans interpreting its actions had made assumptions, believing instinct equaled judgment, behavior equaled guilt. The child's memory, simple and unfiltered, was beginning to reveal a different reality, one adults had overlooked in their reliance on training, authority, and procedure. Lily's body tensed. Her thumb rubbed against the teddy bear's stitched eye, and she whispered the two words again, softly to herself this time. Not him. The words weren't meant for anyone but her own understanding, but they carried a weight far beyond her age. Her lips moved silently at first, then with growing confidence, forming the phrase clearly. At that moment the dog stiffened, ears pricked forward. Officer Keller noticed the change immediately. Something in the animal's posture confirmed what the child had observed. The dog had reacted to the wrong target months ago. Humans had misread the cues. The chain of events that led to the arrest was flawed, not because of the dog, but because human perception had failed. The courtroom, still unaware of what was about to unfold, seemed to hold its breath. Judges, lawyers, officers, and spectators were wrapped in the ritual of the trial, blind to the simple yet profound truth that sat quietly in the front row. Daniel Harper rose slowly, choosing his words carefully. He didn't interrupt the proceedings. He didn't draw attention to the child outright, but he watched, studying the subtle interaction between the girl and the dog. He realized that this child, underestimated and overlooked, held the key to unraveling the assumptions that had dominated the courtroom for months. Melissa Crane, sensing a change in atmosphere, paused mid-argument. Something in the room had shifted, though she didn't yet know what. The dog's alert posture and the child's unwavering gaze created a tension she had never anticipated. She had built her case on certainty, on the dog's flawless record, but suddenly the air was thick with doubt. Judge Whitman, experienced and steady, noticed the girl's focus. He adjusted his glasses, leaned forward slightly, and signaled a brief pause. "Miss Lily," he said gently, "would you like to speak?" The courtroom fell silent. Even the reporters stopped scribbling. All eyes turned to the small child in the front row, clutching her bear. Lily looked up, meeting the judge's gaze. She didn't need prompting. She had remembered everything: the night, the chaos, the dog's reactions. She didn't know the legal words, the proper sentences, or the courtroom etiquette. She only knew the truth. In a voice small yet clear, she said the words that would ripple through the room and beyond. "Not him." Every adult froze. The weight of those two words settled over the room like a storm cloud. The K-9's ears twitched, its posture alert, as if confirming the child's statement. Officer Keller felt his heart tighten. Could a 3-year-old truly identify the truth that months of investigation and testimony had failed to reveal? Melissa Crane blinked, struggling to maintain composure. Daniel Harper's eyes widened slightly, and a spark of vindication lit his features. The courtroom's tension turned into a collective realization. A child's simple observation was about to challenge the very foundation of the case. Lily had spoken, and suddenly nothing could be taken at face value again. The courtroom seemed to shrink in that instant, compressing every heartbeat, every whispered breath into a taut silence. Lily's small hand, clutching the worn teddy bear, rose slowly and pointed toward the German shepherd lying obediently beside Officer Keller. The dog, sensing a shift in energy, lifted its head and tilted its ears forward, attentive but calm. All eyes followed her tiny finger. The adults in the room were frozen. Lawyers, officers, reporters, and the judge each realized that this child, barely able to walk the courtroom without assistance, was about to do something remarkable. The air was electric, a silent current vibrating through every person present. "Lily," her aunt whispered, unsure whether to intervene. Her voice carried concern but also a strange anticipation. The little girl didn't answer. Her eyes never wavered from the dog. Her lips parted slightly, and then, in a soft, steady voice that carried farther than anyone expected, she spoke. "Not him." 2 words, simple, clear, and devastating. The courtroom froze. For a heartbeat, no one moved, no one spoke. The weight of those words settled like a stone on every chest. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, trying to comprehend what had just been said. The prosecution's confident facade flickered. Even Melissa Crane, seasoned and poised, felt her confidence waver. How could a 3-year-old impact the outcome of months of investigation and testimony with just 2 words? Officer Keller's grip on the leash tightened subtly. The German shepherd stiffened as if sensing the gravity of Lily's declaration. Its ears pricked forward, alert, a low growl of tension vibrating through its chest. The dog wasn't angry nor frightened. It was acknowledging a hidden truth, one that had been overlooked. Its reactions were instinctive, but to anyone paying attention, they confirmed Lily's observation. Daniel Harper felt a surge of vindication. Every doubt he had planted over months of research, every overlooked detail and unaccounted variable, suddenly converged into a single, undeniable moment. He had suspected something was off with the dog's actions that night, and now, a small child, barely able to articulate her thoughts, was providing confirmation. Melissa Crane, meanwhile, struggled to maintain composure. She had built her case on the dog's impeccable record, its consistent training, and its proven track record. And yet, here was a child, so young and untrained, challenging that foundation with clarity and precision. The realization unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. For the first time, the certainty she relied upon was under threat. Judge Whitman rapped his gavel lightly, restoring the courtroom to order, though his voice carried an unusual softness. "Silence," he said, eyes sweeping the room. "Miss Lily, would you repeat what you just said for the record?" Lily, sensing the attention, repeated the words without hesitation. "Not him." The murmur in the courtroom swelled, reporters scribbling furiously, pens scratching across paper as if they could capture every nuance of the moment. Spectators leaned forward, some gasping softly, others exchanging confused glances. Everyone understood the weight of her observation, even if they didn't fully grasp why a 3-year-old held such influence. The judge's gavel struck again. "Officer Keller, would you explain what the dog's reaction is indicating?" Keller's throat tightened. He had always trusted his partner implicitly, never doubted a single response. And yet, at that moment, the subtle cues the dog had displayed, the stiffening posture, the pricked ears, the slight growl of awareness, combined with the child's words, painted a new picture. He swallowed, trying to find words precise enough for the court. "The dog," he began slowly, "responded the night of the arrest to stimuli that, at the time, I believed indicated the suspect's presence. But after observing the child and reviewing her statement, it appears the dog may have been reacting to something else entirely, something we misinterpreted." The courtroom erupted into whispers. Lawyers exchanged hurried glances. Even the reporters paused, sensing that this was no ordinary trial moment. It was history unfolding, small and quiet but profound. The prosecution leaned forward, whispering urgently among themselves. What was meant to be a routine confirmation of the K-9's reliability was now under scrutiny, and the credibility of months of testimony hung in the balance. Harper rose from his chair. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady yet forceful, "this statement, though coming from a child, corroborates evidence that has long been overlooked. The dog's actions were misinterpreted, and as such, the foundation of the prosecution's case must be re-examined." Melissa Crane's face tightened. She rose as well, voice calm but strained. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the child's statement, while noted, does not replace formal testimony or evidence." Judge Whitman raised a hand, calling for quiet. His gaze softened briefly on Lily, acknowledging the courage in her small frame. "This court recognizes the importance of all observations," he said. "In this case, the child's recollection and the canine's reaction provide a unique perspective that cannot be ignored." Lily, still holding her teddy bear, looked from the dog to the adults around her. She did not understand fully what she had done. To her, it was simply a memory made real. But in the eyes of the courtroom, her words had altered the balance of power. The previously unquestioned narrative of guilt was now uncertain. The German shepherd stood slowly, tail wagging faintly, and moved closer to the child, sniffing gently but alert. Officer Keller followed, stunned. The dog's behavior, subtle yet deliberate, reinforced Lily's observation. It was as if the animal itself was confirming the truth the child had spoken. The courtroom held its collective breath. A 3-year-old had disrupted the certainty of the case. A police dog, once regarded as an infallible witness, now existed under scrutiny. And every adult in that room realized that the smallest, quietest voices could carry more truth than the loudest arguments. In the audience, murmurs grew louder. Some parents exchanged knowing glances, remembering their own children's uncanny ability to perceive what adults missed. Reporters jotted notes feverishly, aware that this story would spread far beyond Maple Creek. The headline practically wrote itself. 3-year-old points at police dog, changes courtroom forever. Officer Keller knelt down beside the dog, whispering softly, "It's okay, buddy. We'll figure this out." The dog leaned against him, still alert, ears pricked. Its instinct had been right, but the human interpretation had been flawed. And now, for the first time, that truth was being acknowledged. Melissa Crane paused, taking a breath. She had built a career on certainty, on the belief that expertise and procedure were unassailable. But here was a child, untrained, inexperienced, whose simple words had punctured the armor of her confidence. She nodded slightly to herself. The law, she realized, was not about infallibility. It was about truth, and truth sometimes arrived in the most unexpected forms. Daniel Harper allowed himself a small smile. Months of painstaking preparation had led to this moment, but nothing he could have done would have mattered if Lily hadn't remembered. Her observation, pure and unfiltered, was more powerful than any legal argument, and it had changed everything. Judge Whitman cleared his throat again. "We will take a brief recess to allow the parties to review this new development." His voice carried authority, but beneath it was an acknowledgement that the trial had veered into unexpected territory. Everyone filed out slowly, minds buzzing, hearts racing, yet all fully aware that the courtroom dynamic had shifted irrevocably. As the room emptied, Lily stayed in her seat, quietly holding her teddy bear. She had done nothing extraordinary in her mind. She had only spoken the truth. But the adults around her, lawyers, officers, reporters, and even the judge, knew that truth had a force of its own, capable of toppling assumptions and revealing hidden realities. The German shepherd lay back down beside Officer Keller, calm but alert, as if satisfied that a small voice had finally been heard. And in that moment, the courtroom, which had started the day steeped in certainty and authority, understood a powerful lesson. No one, not even the most experienced, could dismiss the perception and insight of even the smallest observer. 2 words had changed everything. The courtroom erupted, though quietly at first, a ripple of whispers that swelled into a low, urgent murmur. Lawyers leaned across tables, officers conferred in hushed tones, and spectators craned their necks to see what had caused such a dramatic pause. Even the reporters, who had long grown accustomed to courtroom proceedings, looked up from their notepads, eyes wide, pens poised but unable to record fast enough. The simple words of a 3-year-old had shaken the room to its core. Not him. Melissa Crane, the assistant district attorney, rose immediately, voice tight but professional. "Your Honor," she began, struggling to steady her breathing, "I request clarification. A child cannot be relied upon as a witness. We have trained officers, documented evidence, and multiple corroborating statements. This is irrelevant." Judge Whitman's gavel came down with authority, though his eyes softened as they settled on the small figure clutching her teddy bear. "Silence in the court," he commanded. "We acknowledge the child's statement. We are not concluding anything at this moment. All parties will have an opportunity to address this appropriately." Even as the order was given, the ripple of unease could not be stopped. The dog, usually a picture of calm discipline, had stiffened subtly in response to Lily's words. Its ears tilted forward, body alert yet controlled, eyes scanning the room. Officer Keller noted the shift immediately, a chill running down his spine. He had trained the dog for years, watched it react to countless scenarios, but the subtle tension he now observed was unlike anything he had experienced before. Something about the child's statement had triggered the animal's instincts in a way that demanded attention. From the defense table, Daniel Harper rose slowly, exuding cautious determination. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, "the child's observation aligns with questions we have long had about the K-9's actions. We believe it is essential to review the evidence anew, particularly in light of what the child has just identified." His words were calm, but there was a spark of triumph in his eyes. After months of exhausting research, he had finally found the leverage he needed. The spectators exchanged looks. For a moment, the court seemed to forget decorum. A woman near the back whispered urgently to her companion, "Can a child really see what we adults miss?" Others nodded, uncertain and tense. Even some of the reporters who prided themselves on objectivity felt a shiver of anticipation. Something extraordinary had occurred here, something that defied conventional expectations. Melissa Crane's hands clenched at her sides. She had built her entire case on the premise of certainty, trust in procedure, trust in the K-9's training, trust in documented timelines. And yet, here was a child barely able to form complete sentences, casting doubt with 2 words. The reality unsettled her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her voice, though calm, carried an undercurrent of frustration. "With all due respect, Your Honor, this does not change the documented events. The dog has acted consistently throughout its career. We cannot allow conjecture to disrupt the integrity of this trial." Judge Whitman listened, nodding thoughtfully. He had seen many courtroom surprises, but few carried the quiet intensity of a child's observation combined with the reaction of a trained police dog. "We are not dismissing evidence," he said gently, "but we must acknowledge that human interpretation, particularly of animal behavior, can be flawed. The court will allow a thorough review of the dog's actions and the child's statement before proceeding." Lily, still holding her teddy bear, shifted slightly, as if sensing the gravity of her words. She did not understand the legal implications, nor did she grasp the complex adult debates swirling around her. But she did understand fear, instinct, and recognition, and the memory of that night months ago pressed insistently in her mind. She had seen what had happened, even if no one else had. Officer Keller exhaled slowly, kneeling beside the dog. He had spent years interpreting his partner's signals, confident in their infallibility. But now he realized that human interpretation could be flawed. The dog had reacted to stimuli that were misread in the moment of the arrest. It was the animal's fault. It never had been. But the revelation threatened the entire narrative. Outside the courtroom, murmurs of astonishment had begun to ripple through Maple Creek. News of the unusual situation spread rapidly. A 3-year-old had spoken, the dog had responded, and suddenly, a seemingly straightforward case was thrust into uncertainty. Residents speculated wildly, wondering how such a small voice could influence the judgment of adults and challenge a trained police officer's credibility. As the recess began, lawyers, officers, and the judge moved to private chambers to discuss the implications. Melissa Crane remained seated momentarily, staring at the small girl in awe and unease. Daniel Harper quietly conferred with experts he had brought in to analyze the dog's past behavior, the surveillance footage, and every detail he had noted over the months. The courtroom, once confident and predictable, now pulsed with uncertainty. During the break, investigators revisited the night of the arrest. Footage was analyzed frame by frame. Sounds were slowed, shadows scrutinized, and the dog's movements were replayed repeatedly. Each time the same realization emerged. The dog had indeed reacted accurately to cues, but the cues had been misinterpreted by human observers. The child's observation, simple and untainted by procedural bias, highlighted the oversight. By the time the courtroom reconvened, tension had escalated. Officers, lawyers, and spectators alike felt the weight of anticipation. The K-9's previous infallibility had been questioned, and the atmosphere buzzed with a mix of anxiety and awe. Even the dog seemed aware of the heightened energy, standing alert and scanning the room, ears twitching at every minor sound. Judge Whitman addressed the court with calm authority. "This trial has encountered an unexpected development. The child's statement, combined with the observations of the K-9 unit, necessitates a review of the case evidence. We will call expert witnesses to analyze the dog's behavior and reassess the events in question. All parties will be given full opportunity to present findings before proceeding." Melissa Crane nodded, still visibly unsettled. She knew the prosecution's certainty had been shaken. Daniel Harper allowed himself a small, controlled smile. Months of preparation had led to this pivotal moment, but nothing could have prepared anyone for the simplicity and clarity of a child's perspective. In the front row, Lily shifted slightly, teddy bear clutched tightly, oblivious to the storm of adult reaction surrounding her. She had spoken what she remembered. That memory, pure and unfiltered, was now a force no courtroom procedure could ignore. The realization hit every adult present. Truth, sometimes, arrives in the smallest, quietest voices. The German shepherd, sensing the emotional and environmental tension, sat obediently beside Officer Keller. Its ears twitched, its eyes never leaving the child. To anyone else, it was a display of discipline and training. But to Keller, it was confirmation. His partner had reacted truthfully that night, and Lily had recognized it. Together, their interactions were rewriting the assumptions everyone had relied upon. By the time the court adjourned for the day, confusion, uncertainty, and anticipation filled the air. Lawyers whispered strategy, officers discussed the canine's training and behavior, and spectators left the courtroom buzzing with speculation. One thing was certain: the narrative had shifted irrevocably. Months of preparation, arguments, and evidence now hung in the balance, all because a 3-year-old girl had remembered something adults had missed. The courtroom, and the town of Maple Creek, had been reminded that the unexpected, the innocent, and the overlooked often carried the most powerful insights. As the doors closed behind the departing crowd, Lily remained in the front row for a moment, her small hand brushing the teddy bear's fur. She didn't understand the legal consequences of her words. She only understood that she had spoken the truth, and somehow, that was enough to shake an entire courtroom. 2 simple words had revealed a crack in a carefully constructed narrative, and no adult, no matter how experienced, could ignore the impact of that quiet observation. Shock and confusion reigned, but amidst it all, one undeniable truth emerged. The smallest voices often carry the greatest power. The courtroom had emptied, but the tension lingered like a heavy fog. Behind closed doors, Judge Whitman, lawyers, and investigators huddled to reassess the unfolding events. The small, quiet voice of a 3-year-old had disrupted months of preparation, shaking the foundation of a case built on procedure, evidence, and the perceived infallibility of a trained police dog. Outside, reporters buzzed with speculation. Word had already spread. A child had spoken 2 words and the police dog had responded. Headlines were forming in their minds. 3-year-old disrupts courtroom. Police dog responds. Maple Creek, a town used to quiet routines and predictable trials, was suddenly swept into a storm of curiosity and tension. Inside the courthouse, Daniel Harper had convened a small team of experts. K-9 behavioral specialists, legal consultants, and investigators crowded around a table, reviewing video footage and witness statements. Every frame of the night in question was scrutinized, every sound slowed, every movement replayed. The K-9's behavior had been precise, but the human interpretation had been flawed. "Notice here," one K-9 expert said, pointing at a paused frame on the screen. "The dog is reacting to a faint scent on the floor near the suspect's vehicle. It's not the suspect himself. The dog is trained to indicate the strongest scent, and human interpretation mistook that as confirmation of the suspect's location." Harper leaned forward, his pulse quickening. This was the confirmation he had hoped for, but he knew it needed to be handled carefully. The courtroom would not accept conjecture. It required facts, analysis, and expert testimony. "So the dog was accurate in its instincts, but the adults misread the signals?" he asked. "Exactly," the expert replied. "K-9s don't judge guilt. They respond to stimuli. Humans overlay judgment onto those responses. The child noticed something adults missed. She saw the connection correctly without bias or assumption." Meanwhile, Officer Keller watched silently, the weight of months of service pressing on him. He had trusted his partner implicitly, yet he had never imagined that a misunderstanding of human interpretation could create a case so flawed. The dog had done exactly what it was trained to do. It was humans who had misinterpreted the cues. He stroked the dog's back gently, whispering, You did your job. We just didn't understand it at the time. Lily's small observation, those two words, were now central to understanding the case. Investigators revisited surveillance footage from the night of the arrest, slowing the video frame by frame. Shadows, noises, and movements that had been ignored suddenly became significant. The dog had reacted to a combination of human stress signals, environmental stimuli, and a faint trace scent, evidence that was never fully captured or understood during the original investigation. Melissa Crane, though initially skeptical, began reviewing the evidence herself. The confidence she had relied upon for months wavered. She had trusted procedure, training, and the police dog implicitly, but now the same facts were taking on a different light. Each frame of footage, each subtle movement, each reaction by the K9 began to suggest that a mistake had occurred, not on the part of the dog, but in human judgment. Even the judge recognized the importance of this revelation. Judge Whitman called for expert testimony to be presented in the courtroom, ensuring that the investigation would be thorough, fair, and transparent. The goal was no longer simply to convict or defend. The goal was to uncover the truth, however unexpected or inconvenient it might be. Lily, unaware of the intricacies of legal procedure, had already done her part. Her memory, sharp and unfiltered, had cut through layers of assumptions. Her perception was pure, untainted by human bias or expectations. And for the first time, adults were beginning to see that her observation was more accurate than the conclusions drawn by professionals. In the courthouse basement, investigators cross-referenced the dog's training logs, patrol reports, and Officer Keller's statements. They discovered subtle discrepancies, notes about environmental distractions, the suspect's movements, and the timing of commands that had never been considered. These details aligned perfectly with Lily's statement. The dog's reaction had been correct according to its instincts, but the human interpretation had misread it, assigning guilt where there was only response to stimulus. Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere was electric when proceedings resumed. The public and media had gathered, sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding. The experts presented their analysis, describing how the dog's actions had been misinterpreted, the role of environmental cues, and the nuances of canine instinct. They explained in detail that canines are not arbiters of justice. They are partners trained to respond, and humans must interpret those responses carefully. Daniel Harper presented Lily's statement, emphasizing the clarity and accuracy of her observation. He highlighted that her words, though simple, aligned precisely with the expert analysis of the dog's behavior and the environmental conditions that night. Every adult in the courtroom began to realize the remarkable nature of the child's insight. Melissa Crane rose again, acknowledging the analysis while maintaining professional composure. While the child's statement is unusual, the court must consider the alignment of expert analysis and evidence. We cannot ignore the possibility that human interpretation influenced our initial understanding. Her voice was measured, but her acknowledgement marked a significant shift. Even the most experienced prosecutors could not dismiss the child's observation when it was corroborated by detailed evidence and expert testimony. Lily, seated quietly with her teddy bear, remained unaware of the profound effect she had caused. She had seen, remembered, and spoken. That was all she had done. And yet her two words were reshaping the courtroom, rewriting the narrative, and altering the perception of guilt and innocence. Officer Keller knelt beside the dog again, whispering, "We'll get it right this time. I promise." The German shepherd leaned into him, ears pricked, eyes alert, as though understanding that a misunderstanding was being corrected. The bond between handler and dog, forged through years of training and service, was stronger than ever, yet the events of this trial had revealed just how fragile human interpretation could be, even with the best-trained partner. As testimony continued, the courtroom slowly shifted from doubt and confusion to clarity. Every frame of video, every behavioral cue, every word spoken by experts reinforced the emerging truth. The dog had done its job correctly. Humans had misread the signs, and Lily's observation had been the catalyst that allowed the truth to resurface. Judge Whitman, presiding with thoughtful calm, summarized the developments. It is evident that while the K-9 unit acted according to training, the interpretation of its behavior was flawed. This court acknowledges the importance of the child's statement in guiding our reassessment of events. We will proceed with this in mind, ensuring that conclusions are based on accurate understanding rather than assumption. In the audience, spectators whispered excitedly. Some were incredulous. Others nodded, recognizing that sometimes the simplest, smallest voices could reveal the most profound truths. Across Maple Creek, conversations would later reflect awe at the courage and clarity of a child who remembered what adults had overlooked. By the end of the day, the case was far from over, but a major shift had occurred. The dog's actions, previously unquestioned, were now correctly understood. The misinterpretation that had fueled the prosecution's certainty was unraveling, and at the center of it all sat a small child, holding a teddy bear, unaware that her observation had redirected the course of justice. Months of preparation, investigation, and courtroom procedure had led to this moment. Yet the catalyst had been simple: a memory, a gesture, and 2 words spoken by a 3-year-old. In that moment, everyone realized the profound lesson of the day. Innocence, clarity, and perception are sometimes more powerful than years of experience and authority. And with the truth resurfacing, the stage was set for the courtroom to confront the full consequences of misinterpretation. The next steps would determine not only the fate of the accused, but also the credibility of those who had relied too heavily on assumptions. Justice, it seemed, was finally beginning to align with reality. Lily's small voice had changed everything, and the courtroom, once so certain, now awaited the next chapter in the unfolding story. The courtroom had transformed. What once had been a chamber of certainty, confidence, and procedure was now charged with cautious anticipation. Every person in the room, lawyers, officers, journalists, spectators, sensed that the next few hours could decide not only the fate of the accused, but also the credibility of everyone involved in interpreting the events that had transpired months earlier. At the defense table, Daniel Harper sat with a quiet intensity. For months, he had anticipated a pivotal moment, but nothing could have prepared him for the extraordinary clarity of a 3-year-old child's observation. Lily's 2 simple words, "Not him," had cut through assumptions, shaken the court, and aligned with expert testimony to illuminate the misinterpretation of the K-9's actions. Now, all that remained was to present the corrected narrative in a way the courtroom could accept. The prosecution, led by Melissa Crane, moved with deliberate caution. Her confidence, though shaken, had not vanished entirely. She had spent years building a reputation on precision, training, and the unwavering authority of law enforcement. Yet even she recognized that the child's statement, supported by expert review and meticulous analysis, could no longer be ignored. She adjusted her notes, breathing slowly, mentally preparing to pivot and address the unexpected challenge without appearing uncertain, a delicate balancing act in front of a judge and public. The judge, Harold Whitman, presided with a measured calm that belied the tension surrounding him. He had spent decades managing complex and high-profile cases, but the present situation was unlike any other. A 3-year-old's recollection, combined with an impeccably trained police dog's behavior, had disrupted months of legal expectation. He understood that this courtroom now operated not just on procedure but on clarity, perception, and truth. As the session resumed, the defense called expert witnesses to explain in detail how the K-9 unit's response had been misinterpreted. Behavioral analysts, K-9 trainers, and investigators presented technical explanations with patience and precision. The dog, they explained, had not identified the suspect directly. Instead, it had reacted to a combination of environmental cues, subtle human movements, and trace scents. The humans observing the scene had assumed guilt where there was none. Daniel Harper highlighted the alignment between these expert findings and Lily's observation. "Your Honor," he stated clearly, "the child has perceived what trained professionals initially missed. Her words, though simple, identify the fundamental misinterpretation that has guided the entire investigation. The dog did its job accurately. It was human assumption, not canine instinct, that created a flawed narrative." Melissa Crane rose, acknowledging the points raised, though her voice carried a restrained tension. "While we respect the expert analysis, the court must recognize the value of corroborated evidence. The child's observation, though compelling, is not a substitute for formal procedure and recorded testimony." Judge Whitman nodded, considering carefully. "All observations, expert testimony, and procedural evidence will be weighed. The court recognizes the importance of accuracy and the impact of misinterpretation in this case. We will proceed with deliberation, taking all factors into account before rendering judgment." In the gallery, spectators whispered among themselves, many astonished at the unfolding events. Some discussed the remarkable ability of a small child to perceive truths adults had missed. Others debated the reliability of expert testimony and canine interpretations. The combination of innocence and expertise had created a rare moment of clarity, and everyone present recognized that history was being witnessed in real time. Officer Keller, seated beside his dog, quietly observed the proceedings. He felt a mixture of pride and humility. The German Shepherd had performed exactly as trained, but the human misinterpretation had caused a ripple effect. Now, with the child's clarity and the expert testimony aligning, he understood how critical careful observation and interpretation were in moments of high tension. He gave the dog a subtle pat, as though acknowledging the bond they shared and the truth they had revealed together. Lily sat quietly, clutching her teddy bear, unaware of the profound effect she had had on the courtroom. She had remembered, observed, and spoken, and now the adults were unraveling assumptions she had never understood. Her 2 words had shifted the momentum, aligning expert analysis with instinctive clarity in a way no one could have anticipated. The judge called a brief recess before the final verdict, allowing all parties to prepare. In private, Melissa Crane and her team revisited the evidence, attempting to reconcile procedural rigor with the undeniable new understanding. Daniel Harper reviewed his notes, making sure every point of clarity, every alignment with the child's observation, and every expert testimony point was ready to present cohesively. During the recess, reporters speculated about the impact of the child's words. Across Maple Creek, residents discussed the extraordinary courtroom moment. A 3-year-old had challenged assumptions, and a trained police dog's behavior had confirmed her observation. Social media buzzed with fascination, and legal experts debated how such a small voice could carry so much weight. When the courtroom reconvened, the air was thick with anticipation. Judge Whitman addressed the room with measured authority. "This court has reviewed all evidence, expert analysis, and observations, including the child's testimony. We will now consider the corrected interpretation of events and proceed toward resolution." Daniel Harper presented his closing argument with precision. "Your Honor, this case demonstrates the importance of accuracy over assumption, perception over presumption. The child's observation aligns with the expert review of the K9's behavior. The evidence shows that the dog acted according to training, but human interpretation led to a misunderstanding. It is imperative that the court weigh this corrected understanding carefully, as it affects the fundamental question of guilt." Melissa Crane rose one final time. "Your Honor, while we acknowledge the new analysis, we maintain that the procedural framework and original evidence remain critical. The child's observation provides valuable insight, but all factors must be considered in balance." The courtroom fell silent, waiting for the judge's words. Even the German Shepherd, usually calm and disciplined, seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, sitting attentively beside Officer Keller, ears pricked, eyes focused. Judge Whitman paused, scanning the courtroom, taking in the experts, the lawyers, the observers, and most importantly, the small child at the front row clutching her teddy bear. His voice was steady, measured, and authoritative. This court recognizes that misinterpretation of evidence, even when unintentional, can profoundly affect the outcome of a case. The K-9 unit acted appropriately, yet human interpretation introduced uncertainty. The child's statement provides clarity that aligns with expert analysis. In light of this, the court finds. A hush fell. Every person leaned forward, breath held, waiting for the words that would determine the outcome. Judge Whitman continued that the evidence, when reassessed under accurate interpretation and corroborated by both expert testimony and observation, does not support the conclusion of guilt as previously presumed. The court acknowledges the exceptional clarity provided by the child's observation and rules accordingly. The courtroom exhaled collectively. Gasps, murmurs, and whispers swept through the gallery. Daniel Harper allowed a small, controlled smile. Months of preparation and meticulous analysis had culminated in this pivotal moment. Melissa Crane nodded solemnly, accepting the outcome with professional grace, while Officer Keller leaned down, patting the dog on the neck, gratitude and relief evident in his eyes. Lily, still unaware of the complexity of her role, simply hugged her teddy bear, the weight of months of memory and observation quietly lifting. To her, it was just a matter of saying what she had remembered, yet her simple action had ensured justice was properly understood. In that moment, Maple Creek's courtroom learned a lesson in humility, observation, and the power of perspective. Experience, authority, and training were important, but sometimes clarity comes from the smallest, quietest voice. The dog, ever faithful, returned to its calm posture, acknowledging the humans around it with a gentle gaze. Its instincts had been correct all along, and the truth had finally aligned with both memory and behavior. 2 words had changed the course of a trial. One small voice had redirected months of investigation, and a trained police dog, disciplined and vigilant, had confirmed what adults had missed. Justice, imperfect and human as it always is, had been restored. The courtroom settled into an unusual calm after Judge Whitman's ruling. Spectators, journalists, and courtroom staff exchanged glances, absorbing the implications of what had just occurred. Months of investigation, arguments, and anticipation had culminated not in a dramatic clash of evidence alone, but in a quiet moment of truth revealed by a 3-year-old child and confirmed by a highly trained police dog. Daniel Harper remained seated at the defense table, shoulders relaxed, though his mind raced. He had won more than a case. He had demonstrated the profound importance of perception, memory, and careful observation. Justice had been served not through forceful argument alone, but by listening to the smallest voices, by seeing clearly what others had missed. Melissa Crane, though professionally restrained, allowed herself a long breath. She had fought hard for months, relying on procedure and K-9 reliability. Now, she had witnessed the power of unexpected insight and the fallibility of human interpretation. The courtroom, she realized, was as much a place for humility as for authority. Lily sat quietly on the bench, teddy bear clutched tightly to her chest. She had no understanding of legal technicalities, no awareness of courtroom procedures, and no concept of winning or losing. All she knew was that she had remembered something important, something adults had overlooked, and that her words had mattered. To her, it was simply a reflection of truth, not him. The German shepherd, now calm but alert, moved closer to Lily. Its large, intelligent eyes watched the child with apparent understanding. Officer Keller knelt beside them, stroking the dog's fur gently. "Good job, buddy," he whispered softly. "We got it right in the end." The dog leaned into him, a quiet affirmation, as though acknowledging that its instincts had been correct all along. As the courtroom slowly emptied, whispers and murmurs filled the halls. Reporters scribbled furiously, recording the events that would soon dominate headlines across Maple Creek and beyond. Some spectators shook their heads in disbelief. Others smiled quietly, touched by the unusual partnership between memory, innocence, and canine instinct. Outside the courthouse, the story spread quickly. Social media lit up with fascination. 3-year-old changes court case with 2 words. Police dog and toddler reveal misinterpreted evidence. Maple Creek courtroom witnessed unlikely hero. Residents discussed the events with a mix of awe and admiration, recognizing that sometimes the truth comes from the most unexpected places. Within the courtroom, Judge Whitman addressed the audience one final time. This case has highlighted the importance of accuracy, observation, and careful interpretation in matters of justice. It has reminded us that insight can come from the most unexpected sources, and that even the smallest voice deserves to be heard. Let this be a lesson in humility, diligence, and attention to detail. Lily's mother approached her daughter, kneeling to her level and brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. "You were very brave," she whispered. "You helped everyone understand the truth." Lily simply nodded, her small hand squeezing her teddy bear. She did not understand the magnitude of her role, but she understood that she had done something meaningful. Officer Keller stood nearby, watching the reunion with pride. His dog, ever faithful, had performed impeccably, but the human misinterpretation had been corrected thanks to Lily's observation. He knelt again, whispering to the German shepherd, "You did your part too. We couldn't have done it without you." The dog wagged its tail slightly, a gesture of quiet satisfaction. Months later, the story became a touchstone in Maple Creek. Residents remembered the unusual trial and the unlikely duo, a child and a dog, whose perception corrected a flawed interpretation of events. Local newspapers ran features about the courage of small voices and the intelligence of police dogs. Experts in law and K-9 training referenced the case as an example of how careful observation and humility are essential in justice. Lily's parents enrolled her in a special preschool program that emphasized observation, memory, and critical thinking, though Lily remained blissfully unaware of her fame. To her, it was just life, play, hugs, and learning. But her parents kept a quiet pride in her achievements, knowing that one day she might understand the extraordinary impact of a single memory, a single observation, and 2 simple words. In the police department, Officer Keller and his K-9 partner were honored quietly. Their dedication, training, and instinct had been validated, and the department implemented new protocols emphasizing careful interpretation of canine signals, especially in high-stakes situations. The dog, for its part, continued to serve with discipline and loyalty, now recognized not just as a partner in law enforcement, but also as a silent witness to truth. Maple Creek residents occasionally recounted the story to visitors, amazed at how a tiny voice had disrupted certainty and reminded adults of the power of perception. Children were particularly fascinated, seeing in Lily a hero whose courage and clarity had altered the course of events. The tale became a local legend, a reminder that justice is a partnership between careful observation, instinct, and sometimes the unfiltered truth of a child. In the quiet of their home, Lily sat on the living room floor, playing with her toys, her teddy bear ever at her side. Her parents watched her, hearts full. They understood better than anyone else the bravery contained in her small body and sharp mind. They whispered to each other in quiet awe, realizing that their daughter had altered the course of human events, not through understanding laws or procedure, but through memory, clarity, and honesty. Officer Keller, reflecting on the case months later, often thought of that day in court. He remembered the stillness, the tension, the moment Lily pointed at his partner dog and spoke 2 words that changed everything. He knew then that instinct and observation, whether human or canine, are intertwined, and he cherished the quiet bond that had allowed both the child and the dog to reveal the truth when adults could not. And so, life slowly returned to normal in Maple Creek, though nothing would ever quite be the same. The courtroom would forever hold the memory of a tiny witness and a faithful K-9 who had together ensured that truth triumphed over assumption. The The story became one of hope, humility, and recognition, that every voice matters, every observation counts, and sometimes the smallest among us can make the biggest difference. Lily, unaware of her role in history, continued to play, laugh, and explore the world with innocence and curiosity. But her 2 words, simple, clear, and true, had left an indelible mark on the town, the justice system, and all who witnessed the courtroom drama unfold. 2 words had rewritten assumptions. One small voice had revealed the truth, and a loyal police dog had confirmed it. Together, they had reminded the world that justice is not just about procedure, authority, or experience. It is about paying attention, listening closely, and honoring the truth, no matter where it comes from. And in the quiet moments, when Lily hugged her teddy bear and the dog rested beside Officer Keller, the message was clear. Heroes come in all shapes and sizes, and sometimes they are the ones we least expect.